That took me by surprise, but here we are.
The countdown didn't conclude. My apologies.
That's okay. Welcome, Notre Dame fans, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Mailbag Friday, and I love Mailbag Friday, Brian. We are live. We are here. We are ready to answer your questions. We've already actually got a bunch of questions lining up in the queue, Brian, which is awesome. First of all, it means people might look as much forward to this as I do. I doubt that, though. And so we've got a bunch of stuff coming your way. I do want to put out there that tomorrow starts spring practice, Brian, and we are going to have our spring preview podcast out tomorrow morning to get you primed and ready for spring practice. I'm excited about it.
We're already halfway through that, actually. We started recording that this morning. We'll finish it up later, but that's been a lot of fun so far. Just looking at a lot of the different position groups that we're excited about and battles and what young players are going to step up, which veterans kind of are in that Miles Boykin come out of nowhere to be a beast type of mode. So that's when you start to really learn about your new team, because every team is different. I mean, in basketball, sometimes maybe you can kind of bring everybody back, but in football, it is impossible to bring everybody back from a team. Yeah. Even last year was the perfect opportunity because everyone was eligible to come back. You could have, and it still, he had a ton of
still didn't do it. Yeah. Right. You still got a bunch of guys.
Right. It's just part of football.
The NFL draft.
It's part of football. So your culture changes, your leadership changes, your playmakers change, your lineups change. Every team is different, and this is your first chance for us to kind of see or hear about what that is going to look like. So that's a very exciting time for me. This is kind of one of my favorite times of the year when we look at covering the football team, because now what we're eventually going to see come to fruition by the end of December and January this is our first chance to kind of see what that's going to look like.
Yep, absolutely. That as a coach, spring practice for me is so much fun because you're seeing those guys that might have toiled in the background, step up, take a leadership role, guys stepping into the starting lineup. There's opportunities for guys that aren't there in the fall. And and some guys, it just happens when a group of guys leaves, a group of veterans leave, all of a sudden a light switch turns on for some guys. They're like, okay, now's my time, and some guys, what to expect when those veterans leave. So it's a lot of fun. I love springtime when it comes to coaching football and covering a football team. And with this team, there's a lot of question marks. There's no question about that. And the best part is finding out the answers to those question marks, Brian. So are you ready to kick this thing off?
Yeah, I mean, and we've already got a ton of questions.
I know.
We've had a couple questions that we got beforehand. So the more we monologue, the less chance we can get into these questions. And there's already some great questions. So I am ready, Vince, to dive right.
All right. Do we want to start with some of those ones from Facebook and Twitter, or do we?
Yeah, let's knock. Those were ones that were done before. Yeah. Let's knock those out really quick, and then and then we've got some. Vincent Roberto is coming with pure heat with the very first question in there. So when we get to that one, that'll kind of kick things off, because it's a good question, but it's a very fair question. It's a very fair question.
I'm going over to Facebook, and Tyler has a question. To what extent will the potential name, image, and likeness legislation change the modern recruiting process? What will Notre Dame do or need to do, because we don't have that answer, to separate themselves from the pack?
I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Notre Dame. I don't think this necessarily changes the landscape as much as people think, because let's be honest, for some schools, they're already paying players. So I don't think earning it legally necessarily moves the needle for them as much. For a place like Notre Dame, if they do it right, it's going to move the needle a ton. Because, hey, look, there are genuine situations where players are taking money because they feel like, if I don't, my mom or my dad can't pay the mortgage, or the lights are going. I mean, that's a legitimate.
Yes.
And it's I've lived in all over the country, and those are realities everywhere. People like to focus on it being a case in the South. I'm like, hey, I'm from Ohio. Trust me, it's happening in Ohio too. It's happening in Pennsylvania where I've lived. It's happening in Virginia,
Indiana. I mean, believe me, I see it every day.
So I get it. Well, now all of a sudden, if you're a top recruit and your mom and dad are like, hey, yeah, we the help would be great, but we need you to go get that education to better yourself for the long term, that long-term financial commitment for you. But now you can do both. You can go to Notre Dame, and if you're a top prospect, you're going to have a chance to start making some money if Notre Dame does it right. Legitimate money, and to say, hey, look, here's some few $1,000s to now all of a sudden mom and dad can keep the lights on and all those types of things. Or if you are someone who, to me, like a Deion Colsey, who doesn't come from a hardship background, but a very intelligent family, and they're already thinking of ways to promote his name, image, and likeness. That's another opportunity where now you can make that money, but you can also go somewhere where you're going to get a phenomenal degree. And I don't know, a place where you can make money and go to a school that has the best business school in the country. That sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like a class to me.
I honestly think if Notre Dame does this right and looks at this with the right frame of mind, I think this could be a huge gap closer for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail. I'm not going to say I'm necessarily confident they're going to do it the right way.
Sure.
But doing it the right, and part of doing it the right way is making sure that kids are still going to class and still getting an education, which I want to ask the NCAA, all these people, like, when are these kids supposed to go to class between practice and all these endorsements and all this other kind of stuff? Right.
Yeah.
But for Notre Dame, I think this could be a tremendous opportunity because now they can start paying players, but doing it legally.
Well, and for Notre Dame, there's not many schools out there that are starting out with the foundation that Notre Dame has as far as the tradition and the name recognition and the brand and all of those things because, you've got your Alabamas, you've got your Clemsons, you've got things of that nature, you got Ohio State. I get all that. Notre Dame's in that conversation when you're talking about brand. And they're the foundation that they're already starting with. Like, if you're trying to do name, image, and likeness at UNLV, right? They're not starting out with the foundation that Notre Dame is
not
starting
for football.
out with. You know what I mean? They're just not. And so Notre Dame has a leg up automatically with their brand. So, like you said, if they do it right, I think that it could be a very beneficial situation when it comes to recruiting. But we have to kind of wait and see.
There are some kids that this doesn't move the needle for.
That's absolutely
Notre Dame isn't getting those kids anyway.
Right.
I don't think Notre Dame's – here's the thing. I don't think Notre Dame's going to lose kids they would have otherwise gotten because of this. And but I think that there are kids that are Notre Dame kids that for different reasons maybe don't view. And then there's other kids who aren't as necessarily interested in taking money, who are going to be more interested in Notre Dame because of exactly what you just said. Boy, you know what? Like, I'm not not every kid. There's this notion that every kid decides that Alabama takes money. That's not true.
It's not true. No.
Some kids want to go to Alabama. Yes, our players getting played. Yes, everyone with the brain and any kind of intellectual honesty is going to tell you, yes, players are getting paid at schools. But it's not every kid, and there are kids who right now aren't that way, whose parents aren't that way, who would like Notre Dame, but there's a few things keeping them down. Well, now you've got an on-field product that's really good and not quite there, but hey, you could be the difference.
You could be the guy.
And now it's opportunity like, hey, you want to major in business? We have the best business school in the country. You want to be able to take some money, whatever it's going to be, and it's not going to be like completely life-changing money. Kids aren't going to be making like $100,000 a year, I don't believe. I imagine they're going to put some caps on it and things like that.
I would hope
But you're going to take that money and you're going to be able to get a tremendous business degree. Well, now you've got money for startup if you're not good enough to go to the NFL, or if you are good enough in the NFL, you got a nice little situation here stashed away to kind of help you with some of those entrepreneurial things. And there's a lot of kids that go to other schools that have that kind of entrepreneurial mind, but they know that those schools are going to give them a chance to make the most money in the NFL because those schools produce more NFL players.
Sure.
So there's all these things that factor into it that now all of a sudden Notre Dame can kind of close the gap again if they do it right. And so I do believe this is a golden opportunity, pun intended, for Notre Dame to close the needle with. And again, it's not for 1 million kids. It's not 40 kids all of a sudden. It's just, what do we keep talking about? It's 1 or 2 kids on each side of the ball that can be that difference maker. And especially the one position that matters the most, quarterback. There is not a school in the country that if you go to that school and you're a star quarterback, that you're going to have more opportunities than Notre Dame. Not a one.
No doubt.
Not a one.
No doubt. Okay, Brian, we're gonna jump over to the Twitter machine, and we've got a question in here from ER. All right, this is an X's and O's question, so I know you're gonna like this. Is a rover used differently in a 3-3-5 than in a 4-2-5? And does it require a different style of player?
So I responded to this question on Twitter, and as I've thought more about it, is a little bit more nuance required, because number one is, what position are you calling the rover? That's what I don't know. And will the rover in a 3-3-5 be sort of that Sam linebacker we've talked about? And if that's the case, then he'll be a lot different than the rover from what we've seen now in a 4-2-5,
which is a more like a safety body.
Right. And, Drew Tranquill's played it. Jeremiah Wusu's played it. They were linebackers, but they were more safety bodies.
Sure, yeah.
Especially early on in their tenures. Drew Tranquill was recruited to play safety. Jeremiah Wusu played basically a safety position in high school. If they're in a 3-3-5 and the rover is that third linebacker, then it's going to be different. It's going to be more like what Notre Dame did. Let me change. It's that position will be more like the rover that Notre Dame has had.
Yes.
Okay. If they go to a 3-3-5 and the rover is the third safety, then it completely changes, because now it's more of a true defensive back type of position. You still want the length, ideally. You still want now Jeremiah Wusu could fit in that category. Drew Tranquill isn't.
Right. He's more of the rover in the 3-3, like as far as being that third linebacker. That's right. That's Drew Tranquill.
Right. Yeah. Whereas Jeremiah Wusu is the only rover Notre Dame has had that could play that as a safety. And even then, it's kind of like, I don't know if I'd even play him then. I'd still have him as that third linebacker, that same linebacker. So that's where it would change if that fifth safety is more of how they use the rover, which is at Cincinnati. That's kind of how it was. I mean, that fifth DB played a lot differently than how Notre Dame uses its rover. That third linebacker does not. So that would be my question, is it depends on what they define as the rover. Is it the Sam linebacker in the 3-3-5, or is it the fifth DB? And that's going to change the answer. So if it is the third linebacker, then it will stay somewhat similar. Right. If it's the fifth DB, then it completely changes, because they use that player completely different than the way that Notre Dame used their quote-unquote fifth DB, which was the rover, and it was completely different.
Yes. Okay, Brian. Are you ready for the heat?
Yes, let's do it.
Because Vincent, by the way, great name, Vincent Roberto has this question. Does Notre Dame get rid of Brian Kelly if they don't take the next step within the next year or two? And a couple of, David actually answered that question, which I thought was great. But I want your answer, Brian. Let's see what you got.
Well, show what David put up there. And because I think David kind of represents what a lot of people are thinking.
Yeah. He says, I don't think so, Vincent. 43-8 doesn't get you fired. And then he followed that up with, but all of us wish for better. Right. I share your sentiment.
See, that's the rub. So to me, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be capable of not going in one direction or the other. I don't think just staying the same is going to happen, because the schedule jumps up in 22 and 23. And if you're not a better program, then you're going to be back to 8-4s and 9-3s more. Yep. And if Brian Kelly takes a step back, could I see them having a conversation about moving on? Will he get fired?
That's a nuanced
they
word.
Have a mutual decision to, Brian Kelly decides he's going to retire.
Right.
Sure.
Honest, and I think that's the same conversation with Mike Bray. It's right. Hey, we love what you've done for us.
But they've taken a step back. And so to me, if Notre Dame is still going 10-2 every year, there is no appetite. Not necessarily. There's no appetite at Notre Dame to move on. Notre Dame's administration, in my opinion, would like to win a championship, but they're perfectly fine going 10-2 every year.
Sure.
Sadly, there's a big chunk of the fan base that is now content with that as well, because in their mind, and it's the worst argument I've ever heard. Well, do you want to go back to the days of Bob Davie and Ty? As if firing Brian Kelly means, yes, we want to fire Brian Kelly because we want to be like it was under Charlie.
Right. Why does it have to be one or the other?
Dumbest thing I've ever heard of. No, it's Brian Kelly has done a phenomenal job at Notre Dame. A phenomenal job.
Yes.
Go back and look at where the program was when he took over in 2009. End of the 2009, he was hired December, and where it is now, and it is light years away, facility-wise, recruiting-wise, talent-wise, NFL production-wise. Wins and losses now is at that point now. Yeah. But even then, with the exception of 2016, his down years were like 8-5, whereas down years in previous coaches were losing seasons.
Yes.
And so to me, the program has come a long way, but this is still Notre Dame. This is still a place where championship should be the goal. And I'm tired of people saying, well, academics is okay. So like every great player doesn't care about going to school. That's incredibly prejudiced and wrong.
No kidding. No kidding.
And because no one says that about linemen, right? Or tight ends, right? What? Okay. So what are we talking about here? So that's false. Facility wise, Notre Dame can more than hang with those people. Now people say, well, they don't have student only dorms. I don't care. Most Notre Dame students like the fact that it's that way. So those aren't if a kid says I didn't go to Notre Dame because they didn't have athlete only dorm, he wouldn't come to Notre Dame anyway. Right. And if he did come to Notre Dame, he wasn't going to make it, right? Because he's just coming here for just football. And there's plenty of kids out there that I'd like to have an athlete dorm, but I don't care because I'm here for other reasons. So the thing that the camp that I fall in is I'm not talking about firing Brian Kelly. I've never talked about fire. I didn't talk about firing Brian Kelly after 4-8. That's not what I do. My whole objective and what I do of my criticism is to say, yeah, coach, you've done a great job, but this is Notre Dame, and it's now about taking the next step and not being content going 10-2. Not use the fact that Brian Kelly after when he talks about the 2018 season says, well, we didn't lose to Clemson as much as Alabama did. What? Hey, right. I'll trade. If I'm Alabama, I will trade places with Alabama in a heartbeat. You take the worst loss and give me the 6 national titles.
Yes,
because you come on. And could you imagine Urban Meyer or Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney ever making that argument?
Never going to happen.
That's the frustrating thing is, hey, coach, it's okay to say, you know what? We didn't get it done. Right after the game, that's fine. You want to, make sure your players are feeling good, but then come out and stop being so defensive and say, hey, look, 10-2 isn't good enough. I came here to win championships, and we've got to make changes to do that. I'm hoping that he does that because there is another level. And if he's not willing to make the changes and he just keeps doing what he's doing and they just kind of stay stagnant, okay, so then are you willing to just say, well, fine, we just give up the fact that Notre Dame can never compete for championships? I think there's a lot of people that would say that, which is why I don't think Brian Kelly's job is in jeopardy if he just maintains what he's doing, which is 10-2 every year. And also, look, if you did fire Brian Kelly, good luck trying to hire a coach. It's like, wait a minute, right? I'm gonna go to a school that's gonna fire me because I go 10-2 every year. Right. It wouldn't be that kind of thing. It may be like hey, you know what, coach? Like, hey, we'll give you a lot of money and you walk away and go work into TV and all that kind of stuff. But I don't see that happening. And I'm hoping that we don't have to have this conversation. I'm hopeful that Coach Kelly's going to make the changes needed because I do think he's someone capable of taking Notre Dame to that next level. I thought it when they hired him in 2009, and I believe that now. Is he willing to do the things that it's necessary to do that? Yes. But does he have the talent, the intellect, all the different things a head coach needs to win a national championship? I believe he does, which is why I'm so critical of him. If I didn't believe he did, then I wouldn't criticize him because, hey, look, he's doing the best he can
with what he's got. Yeah,
not with what he's got, because it's not the institution, with who he is.
Sure,
unless that's what you meant by what he's got.
Right.
And that's why I'm critical of him, because I don't think he's maximizing his potential as a head coach, which in turn maximizes the potential of the program. So I don't think he'd get fired unless he takes a step back. I don't think it's just not taking another step would be the reason that got him would have them part ways. He'd have to take a step back. We'd have to go back to the 8 and 5s, that kind of thing.
And I think it would have to be consecutive years too. It's not going to be a 1 year blip.
It'd have to be like 9 and 4 this year because they go 9 and 3 and lose a bowl game, and then 8 and 5 the next year. Then it's like, hey, coach, like, look, you've taken as far as you can take us. Let's make a change. But I hope that we don't have to have that conversation, because I truly believe that Brian Kelly has this program on the cusp of that next step. And if he can just make those final tweaks, then I think we can have it. And somebody sent me a tweet, Vince, today that I absolutely want to play real quick that just backs up what I've been saying. And this is what I hope ultimately Brian Kelly comes with this year. So I'm going to play this little thing for you. This is Nick Saban. Paul Agresta sent me this on a private message on Twitter. So I want to share this with you. So there's going to be some sound here. So this is Nick Saban. Okay.
Grew up with the idea.
Can everybody hear that?
Play good defense. You run the ball. I grew up with the idea that you play good defense, you run the ball, you control vertical field position on special teams, and you're going to win. Whoever rushes the ball the most for the most yards is going to win the game. you're not going to win anything. Now doing that. I grew up with the idea.
So that's Nick Saban saying that, right?
That's adapting to the game, right?
It's and he's done it. The proof is in the pudding. Look at the offense that he ran in 9 and 11 and 12. It was ball control, power, great defense, holding teams to 10 points a game.
Beat
and
the
now
crap out of you in the trenches.
Now it's we're scoring. We got to score because he's seen it. Because they saw it when they lost to Ole Miss 2 years in a row. They saw it with Johnny Manziel. They saw it with the emergence of Clemson. They've seen it with LSU. You got to score. And so the best coach of our generation is saying, I had to change what I believe in because I knew that's what it took us to get us to the next level. The thing about Brian Kelly is he doesn't have to change what he believes in. He has to go back to what he used to believe. That's the exciting thing for me to say.
Yeah.
If Brian Kelly goes back to the guy that I saw that got hired at Notre Dame, that's the final step.
Yep.
So it's not about him becoming something he's not. It's go back to what got you here. And if you do that, then I'm excited for what this program could be the next couple of years.
All right, Brian, we got a ton of questions, and the queue is getting full, brother. So Dylan has a question about recruiting. Once a player commits, what all goes into keeping their commitment? Do you feel good about this staff being able to retain these early commits?
I think it's just you know that you have to recruit a guy the entire year, and you have to understand which recruits you have to recruit the most. So what you can't do, even with the most solid of commitments, is you can't just like, okay, good luck, we'll see you in November or we'll see you in December. You have to stay engaged. You have to keep that relationship going with other guys that are getting recruited by Ohio State. We got our verbal commitment. What the expression, the old saying is, well, all that means is now everybody knows who's the leader.
Who's the leader in the clubhouse? Right? Yes, exactly right.
And so that guy, you don't stop recruiting until you get his signature. And there's different levels. So you have to know that as a staff. You have to understand that. You have to make sure you're committing the right resources to keeping that true. You have to make sure that other commits are staying engaged with that kind of kid and always want to be ahead of, know what's coming. I think in the past, what would get Notre Dame in trouble when they'd lose commitments is they would kind of get a guy and just kind of leave him alone. That's what hurt him with Deion Colsey last year. That's just the truth. That's what he was telling people behind the scenes was, look, I got all these SEC schools calling me and, I don't hear from, my position coach in forever. And unfortunately, Tommy Rees was able to get involved and get him back into class. But you can't have those kind of mistakes. And they used to make those kind of mistakes a lot. Remember the Ronald Darby situation? Similar situation. It was just like we didn't stay involved with them enough. They've done a much better job of that in recent seasons. Really, since the post-2016 makeover, they've done a really good job of continuing to recruit kids throughout the process. Mm-hmm. And that's why they haven't lost that many kids. And the kids that they did lose, you're kind of like, I don't think that, we aren't surprised by them very often. And then last year they lost 2 commits and they got them both back, which, it just says a lot about just that relationship that they build. And if the relationship isn't initially strong enough, then you can't repair that bridge or whatever the case may be. But with Deion Colsey and with Philip Riley, they were able to get them both back into class because the foundation was so strong. The relationships were so strong. They were able to get it done. So that to me is really what goes into keeping a kid committed. I'm confident they're going to keep all the kids in this class that they want to keep in this class.
That they want to keep.
I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. That was an interesting little twist there. All right. I watch a lot of movies. You left me a cliffhanger. Okay. Joseph has a recruiting question for you, Brian. Does ND have a shot with Darius Clemens?
Not until they get him on campus.
Okay.
Do they have a shot in that they made us, what it was, a top 10 or whatever it was recently? He released a top 8 or 10 or something like that. Notre Dame was in it. That's great. They're in the conversation. The reason I don't talk about him a whole lot, Joseph, like I did a Dream Class article yesterday, and I didn't mention him because I don't view him as a realistic option yet.
Okay.
If they get him on campus, yes, big deal. But this is a kid that's out in Oregon and played his junior year in Utah because they didn't have football in Oregon, which I love that, by the way. He didn't just take the year off. He said, fine, I'm going to go move to Utah and play in Utah. I love that. That tells me that kid's a competitor. I love it.
Well, there was a lot of that in Indiana. Yes. Let me tell you. A lot of Illinois people and a lot of Kentucky people.
And so I love that about Darius Clemens. So I like Darius Clemens a lot as a player. It's just until he gets on campus, I'm not viewing that as and that's not true of every kid. This is true of him. Until they get him on campus for an official or an unofficial visit, I don't feel like there's much of a shot there. But if that changes and they get him on campus, then Joseph, come back and talk to me, and I'll feel a lot better about that because he can flat out play. He is a good football player.
All right, DeBeezy has a question about spring practice. With it being close to the media, what are you most looking forward to hearing from your sources? And we have a couple.
DeBeezy, man, come on.
Well, I kind of put it together.
DeBeezy there, it's DeBeezy. Come on now.
Yeah, I teach in South Bend. All right.
Okay.
There's a couple other kind of similar questions. Let's see here. There was one. Where was it? I can't even find it now. But there was other ones about what do we want to see, what do we want to hear, from the sources, since we can't obviously attend spring practice. So I'll let you go first, because a lot of this information is going to be in our spring preview podcast that is going to go out tomorrow. But we can kind of give a little synopsis here.
I think for me, it's Jack Cohn. I want to hear how he's doing, how well he's performing. I want to hear how the offensive line battle is shaping up. I want to hear about how the freshmen and defense in the secondary are performing. And we'll have a podcast out tomorrow where we talk about all this stuff.
Yep.
So I'm not going to get too much into that now. But the big thing for me, the biggest takeaway from all of it is, if we don't see the philosophical changes on offense, none of that other stuff is ultimately going to matter.
That's fair.
Notre Dame has the talent. They're going to go 10-2 at worst next year. That's how confident I am.
Schedule's not that great.
And it's not just that, Vince. It's also, that's the confidence that I have in that Brian Kelly has the program in a place where they're going to beat most of the teams on their schedule. They have better players then.
Sure.
They're not going to just lose the games that they used to lose early in his career, but also more thinking in before that, where they're just like, how do you lose to that team?
Yeah, right.
They're not losing to Navy this year. They're not losing to those teams.
Right.
So I'm confident they're going to be a 10-2 team this year. It's just, can they take that next step? That's going to require that philosophical change. If that happens, boy, then I'm feeling really good about it. But that's a big thing for me. And then defensively, it's just, how quickly does Marcus Freeman kind of get caught up to speed in that relationship building on and off the field? The off the field part I feel good about. I've heard some things about conversations he's had with players that it's just, there's an immediate connection. There's an immediate trust being built. Like, hey, this guy shows up and all of a sudden he cares about me.
Yeah.
He's asking me questions I've never had anyone at Notre Dame ask me. Not about football. So I love hearing that, but it's more about that relationship on the field, that trust on the field that they have in him and that he has in them. And I think that's going to be big for me. Those are my two big storylines. That big picture are what I'm going to be focused on coming out of the spring.
All right. Hi, Tracy.
Thanks for joining.
I had to put that one up there. All right, Dylan's got another question. And we also discussed this one a little bit. Do you have concerns about Kevin Austin being the same player after the surgery? Do you think that his injury-riddled career is going to impact his skill set?
I don't think he's had an injury-riddled career. He didn't get hurt as a freshman, and he didn't get hurt as a sophomore. He got suspended as a sophomore. He was healthy the whole year.
Right.
This year,
played some as a freshman. Yeah. I mean, he was, yeah.
And when he got taken out of the rotation for the most part late in the year, it wasn't because of injury. It was because of
other stuff.
Yeah. So for me, I don't think it's not injury-riddled. He had an injury-riddled 2020. Which, to Dylan's question, does have me concerned about what he'll be. Because
and the specific injury that he had, and the fact that he broke his foot, we know of twice, and we're hearing maybe a third, right? That is the concerning part. It's the location of the injury. It's the fact that he continues to break the foot. That's the concerning part, especially when you're a wide receiver. Well, any football, you need your feet. I mean, it is what it is. So that part does concern me, and the proof is going to be in the pudding. We're going to have to see him on the field, making cuts, seeing if he can jump. All of those different things. This is a really important spring/fall for him. To see,
because I don't know how much we're going to see him this spring.
That's exactly right.
We're not going to see him at all. I don't know how much he's going to be able to play this spring. And again, it's not saying he's not gonna. It's I don't know. I don't know how much he's going to play. I mean, he had surgery after the season, which I don't see how in 3 months that he's all of a sudden going to be able to play. So I think he's going to be limited. But yes, Dylan, I have concerns about him. I think Braden Lindsey has had more of an injury-riddled career.
Agreed.
But Kevin Austin is more of the immediate injury concern for me because of like you said, if it was just a torn ACL, okay. I mean, that's just like not that devastating injury anymore. If it was like a badly sprained ankle or a hamstring, okay, you give it time and rest. Foot injuries and Achilles injuries, which are, obviously part of the foot, I believe. those injuries are can be more debilitating because there's a lot of small bones in your foot,
right?
And you're carrying a lot of weight,
and you're putting that stress on there all the time,
right?
When you're just
and sometimes once they break, it's just you're never going to be the same. Sometimes, yeah, right. It's a big question mark for me.
Absolutely. Another recruiting question here from Michael. If linebacker Jay Sneed commits, do you take the first to commit of Cheeks and Tua Alamaka, or do you take both? And I remember, I'm sure I butchered that name, but
no, you actually did a decent job. Tua Alamaka.
I thought I heard you say at one point in our ramblings in the past that Notre Dame could take 5 linebackers. Is that?
No, I said I wish Notre Dame could take.
Oh, okay.
We had a question about would they take 5 linebackers.
Okay.
And I said I wish.
Okay.
I wish you could take all 5 of those guys because to your point, Michael, is there's a lot of versatility there. And if you were taking 5 linebackers and they could really only fit into 2 spots, that'd be stupid. But I think that when you look at Nolan Ziegler and Josh Burnham, there's 2 to 3 positions each with them. When you look at Junior Tuialamaka, there's at least 2 positions he could play, including maybe becoming a Viper. Same thing with Jalen Sneed. Jalen Sneed, to me, could be sort of a hybrid third down player. Could he be that Sam linebacker? Yeah. Could he maybe even be a rover if they're going to be more of a 4-2-5, which in this season we're expecting their base is going to be a 4-2-5.
Sure.
If they keep that going, could he be a rover in that defense? Maybe. Could he be a Viper?
Yeah.
If you go to a 3-3-5 and you're going to have a like Nolan Ziegler as a rover and then a Sam, then you could play them both with 2 of those other guys. So there's a chance that eventually they could get into 4 guys that are linebackers on the field. So the versatility of that group is the important thing. And there's another question kind of on that Dylan Hoffman says, how excited are you about the possibility of landing Sneed, Tuialamaka, Burnham, and Ziegler? And yeah, I mean, very, but I'd also throw in Sebastian Cheeks in that conversation. I think you could throw in Devin Jackson. Some people are very, very excited about Devin Jackson. So it's got a chance to be a great linebacking core. I've heard, I think it was Tom Loy. Somebody told me that Tom Loy wrote a story saying they're only going to take 3 linebackers. That would surprise me a little bit. Yeah. I think that might just be kind of recruiting gamesmanship to say, hey, jump on board. I think they'll eventually take 4. I don't think they if we had unlimited scholarships in 2021, like if the NCAA said, hey, look, we're going to go 95 scholarships this year as teams kind of deal with the COVID situation of the players coming back, and then we'll go, we'll be back to 85 by 2023 or something like that, or where they extended, go 95 and 21 and then 90 in 2022, and then you're back. Then you could do it because then you could have that one buffer year where you could have more guys on your roster. And then after that, Bo Bauer's gone, Shane Simon's gone, those guys are gone. And it makes more sense. I wish they could take 5. I don't think it's possible numbers wise. But if they could figure out a way to make it work, Michael, then you make it work. Because all 5 of those guys, to me, are top 100 talents, in my opinion. And Nolan Ziegler isn't there yet because his body's still developing, but his upside, top 100 player, no question. They all got at least a 4.5 upstar grade for me. And several of them have 5-star upside grades. I mean, this has a chance to be a special linebacker class.
How about a tight end question? Brian, let's see. At tight end, do they take the first to commit of Raridan or Stays, or does Raridan not have a committable offer?
He has a committable offer, from what I understand, and I don't think they would necessarily say no to either one of them. I think that Notre Dame would like to have both of those guys in this class, and then you figure out a way to make it work. I think with looking at the current roster, there's some potentially some movement could happen between now and then. Looking at other positions and things along those lines.
I'm gonna throw that one out there as you're talking about these guys.
And so I think there's a chance they can play both, because here's the thing about those 2 and Jack Nickel. Jack Nickel, to me, is a throwback tight end. He is a Brock Wright type of player. I don't mean what Brock Wright was in high school. I mean what Brock Wright was at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Lead
blocker.
Right. Holden Stace is more in the Michael Mayer category. I'm not saying he's as good as Michael Mayer. I'm talking about how he's used. Attached tight end, can play some flex, occasionally play in the slot, whereas Eli Raridan is more of a Tyler Eifert type. Again, style of play, not that they're going to be first-round draft picks. Style of play. And so you can move him at X. He has some big receiver in him, to Searcher Green's question. Are they big receivers? No. Can they be utilized in certain situations in that role? where if you're in a 2 tight end set, you put 1 tight end, like let's say you have a situation where you've got 2 receivers on the field, right?
Yeah.
So we'll look at the last 2 classes. So you've got Deion Colsey and Lorenzo Styles on the field to the right, and you've got Holden Stace in a slot position, like that number 3 position or a flex position, and then you've got Eli Raridan backside. So in a 12 personnel, you're trying to throw a different wrinkle. Say, are you going to keep a corner backside against our tight end, which now we have some matchup advantages to the field, or are you going to try to put a safety out there? And if you're going to pour a linebacker out there, and if you're going to do that, then we're throwing to the tight end.
Yeah,
backside.
Right.
So, putting that defense in that kind of bind, could they do that as a wrinkle with those guys? Absolutely. Would they be guys that would be big receivers all the time? No, they're not those guys. But again, if you're using that 12 personnel correctly, then you're essentially getting that same impact from them, even though they're not technically wide receivers.
We've got a philosophical / XO question for the offensive line. Joseph wants to know, for offensive linemen with similar heights and weights, what makes one a tackle and the other a guard?
It varies. So there's temperament and then there's athletic skill. The temperament aspect of it is some guys are just, I want to fire off and crush you.
Guards.
Those are not good guys to have a tackle.
Those are guards.
Those are guards. Because in tackle, there's a level of patience needed at tackle. You're seeing things, the twists and the stunts are tend to be longer developing things for you as a tackle. You have to have some patience where when you're in your pass set, you may not get to your 3rd or 4th step before you're engaging a guy. Whereas at guard, you're engaging in step 1.
Immediate.
And you can get away with a guy that's just a bull, I want to come off the like Quentin. I've made this about Quentin Nelson. This athletically, could Quentin Nelson play tackle? Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely.
Does he have the temperament for it? Not in how he plays now. He'd have to change his temperament to play tackle in a modern offense. So that's the temperament aspect of it. I hope that makes sense. And then athletically, some guys are 6'6", 305 and super athletic, and some guys are 6'6", 305 and they're a little stiff. They maybe don't have great lateral quickness. They may have tight hips. Those aren't guys you want on an island because they're going to face so much more. They got to plant and redirect. If you're out on an island and you got a guy speed rushing you on the outside and then he plants and makes a double move, you got to have the ability to quickly plant and work back inside. And if you don't have that lateral quickness, the agility, the suddenness to stop and make that move, you're going to get beat on double moves all the time.
Right.
At guard, you're going to limit that in most offenses. Now, in air raids, a lot of times because there's so much spacing, and I'm talking like the throw it all the time air raids.
Right.
You can get in some trouble there because there's so much space between the linemen that you're almost all on an island.
You're almost all tackles.
Yeah,
right.
Like the old Texas Tech, under Mike Leach offense. So,
right.
And we don't see as much of that anymore. I mean, Hal Mummy used to have you could go stretch your arms out and you're not touching anybody or even coming.
Right.
They're both doing it and you're not. It would just get absurd, but you don't see as much of that anymore. But those guys, everything happens quicker. So you can get away with being a little bit tighter athletically. You can get away with, maybe not having that lateral quickness where in a pass setting, but you can still somewhat be hindered there too, because in a zone offense, you can be hindered. In a gap scheme, you can be more plotting.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is in a zone scheme, a lot of times, I'm a guard and you're the center, right? And so there's a guy kind of lined up on your inside and we're working together. If we're working on a stretch play, I got to get to that. I got to overtake that guy. So even though he is lined up on you, I've got to be quick enough and athletic enough to work with you and then eventually overtake him, meaning I got to get to his outside shoulder, the one away from me. Well, if you're a stiff guy with bad lateral quickness, you're not going to be effective making that block.
Right.
In a gap scheme, a lot of it is just down and pull, down and kick, down and wrap. And a guy that maybe isn't quite good with the lateral quickness can be more effective in those type of schemes than he can in a team that wants to run a lot of mid-zone, outside zone, which are more fast swipe type plays that require some quickness and athleticism. And that's why I think you saw sometimes Tommy Kramer had some issues late in his career after all the injuries he had. He wasn't always laterally quick enough to get out and reach that guy. And it required Notre Dame to alter their scheme at times to make sure that they could get that done.
Okay, we have a question about some assistant / analysts Are Cooks and or Lazinski staying with Notre Dame?
So that would be Kerry Cooks, who is a defensive analyst, and Nick Lazinski, who is a graduate assistant. I believe as of right now, both are with Notre Dame.
That's what I believe as well.
That is huge because those guys are two flat out really good football minds and good football coaches. And if they can keep Kerry Cooks on staff, and if I'm Brian Kelly, I am giving him a big pay raise to stay as an analyst because he's going to be able to help Chris O'Leary kind of come along. And Kerry Cooks is the kind of guy, in my opinion, I thought he should have got the job. My understanding from talking to people is he wanted the job. The fact that he didn't just bolt right away says a lot about his character, his love for Notre Dame. The fact that he came back to Notre Dame says a lot about that. But if I'm Brian Kelly, I'm getting him a pay raise and say, hey, look, Kerry, please stay. Help us out with this kid. And then all of a sudden he can maybe set himself up to get back into a full-time coaching some other time. But yeah, those guys are really talented football coaches. And in a day and age where you have to be good beyond your 10, having two guys like that on your offensive staff or defensive staff, and they just hired Mike McCray as a GA. Remember Mike McCray that played at Michigan? He was a captain a few years ago at Michigan. Yeah. He's now one of their GAs.
Okay.
So I might have to, tap his cell and stuff just to make sure he's not, sending old messages back to old Jim.
No, Jim.
No, I'm just kidding. But no, that's another one because he was a smart football player. You could just watch him play. You could just tell, leadership, fire. He was a really smart player because he wasn't a great athlete. So you have a guy like that as a GA. I think Brian Kelly is starting to understand how important it is to have your support staff not just be a bunch of fresh out of school kids that are running and getting donuts and drawing up scout team cards. You need guys that can flat out coach. You need guys that can evaluate as good as the guys you have. And we're starting to see Notre Dame get to that point, especially on defense.
I'm going to skip one, but then go back to it. But Ryan is basically making a comment. Can we also point out that Notre Dame is a global brand? Name another university that the power compared to Notre Dame. I mean, they were about to go play in Ireland. Yeah, that was my point exactly.
Is that back to the original?
That was the name likeness. That was my point exactly, is that Notre Dame
Ryan, let's be honest about something. If Notre Dame wanted to play in a foreign country every year, they could.
Absolutely, they could.
You don't think? Remember, they played in Japan once. I think it was like during this. I don't think it was during the regular season, but it was during the Holtz era. They played a game in Japan.
That's right. And then Holtz took a bunch of guys that used to play, kind of an all-star.
That might have been it. That might have been it.
Because my old head coach went. He took a group over there.
You don't think they could get a game in Rome if they wanted to?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the thing is Notre Dame is a yes. Notre Dame. Well, I don't know what kind of football game you're trying to play there, buddy.
Come on, man.
I'm kidding, but Ryan's point is correct. This Notre Dame is unique, and non-Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame haters can get all in their feelings all they want. Oh, you're a elitist. Well, okay, whatever. I'm not. Yeah. I'm just speaking facts.
Okay.
I mean, there's not many teams that could go play a game in a foreign country and sell the stadium out. Notre Dame can. Yep. And that's what makes them unique. And they have done a good job of taking advantage of that in a lot of ways. They have when it comes to TV and branding and making money. If they do that with this name, image, and likeness thing, I'm telling you, it could be a game changer for him. And Ryan's spot on. It's a global brand. It's not just Alabama is a football brand. Notre Dame is beyond that. Whether people want to admit it or not, they are.
All right. I scrolled way down to look at the new comments, and now I'm lost. But nope, it is.
Here's one.
Found it. Okay, that's what I was going to throw up. Good.
So Dylan Hoffman asks, are we in pursuit of any safeties for 2022? Names I've heard, that'd be Jaden Bellamy, Jaden Mangum, Jake Pope, a lot of J's. And obviously Xavier Nwankpa is the pipe dream. I don't think he's a pipe dream per se. I don't think Notre Dame, it's going to be tough, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily a pipe dream. If they can keep him in the mix enough to get him on campus, that would be a big thing. I think they have shown attention to Sherrod Colville. I just don't think it's being reported on a whole lot. As far as the possibility of bringing in Xavier Nwankpa, again, they are in it. I would say they're in his top 3 or 4 if he had one, just based on his comments. And sometimes when a kid is asked a lot about who are the top schools you're talking to, Notre Dame's always in that first group. Ohio State's his leader. They have to get him on campus again. That's going to be the big thing, is they got to get him on campus. So are the odds slim right now? Yeah, I'd say probably 30-70, but they're in it. It's not like this pipe dream of, some player was like, there's other guys that they're in on, but they have no shot at that guy. That's not Xavier. I think they are paying attention to Sherrod Colville. I just don't think he necessarily does a ton of media. They're on him. I've talked to people. They like him. Jaden Mangum's a guy they like a lot. Jake Pope, KJ Winston, who is a safety from the Maryland, D.C. area, is another guy Notre Dame is in on a lot. That they like him a lot. That's another name to consider. Jaden Mangum's a guy I like a lot. Jake Pope's a guy I like. Both of those guys were on my dream class sort of breakdown. Devin Moore, a corner safety from Naples that projects to be a safety in college. That's another guy that Notre Dame is in on. They made his group of, I think, five. He released like a 5 or 6, top 5 or 6. Notre Dame was in that. So there's a good number of safeties they're in on. I just don't think some of these guys are really super highly ranked. So maybe they're not getting the love, but
yeah,
they're good football players. Jaden Mangum may not be ranked high. Jake Pope may not be ranked high, but those guys are darn good football players. Same with Sherrod Koval. I mean, and of course he's from Virginia. So I mean,
shock.
That's another thing that you have to consider. That's another plus for him.
This is kind of a big picture, and you could probably talk about this for an hour and a half. But where do you think the 22 Notre Dame recruiting class will be ranked when it's all said and done? Obviously, there's a lot of speculation into this question.
And I'm not going to do that. I mean, it's a great question from Notre Dame.
They're in good position. They're in a good position with a lot of guys, but they got to close.
They're where they rank right now is about where they always rank. So they're up to number 2. Well, they were up to number 1 at one point in time last year and finished like 8th. Right? It's about how you close.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame has got. I think when you look at last year, I would say they're in a better place now to finish with a top 5 class than they were last year. The reason I say that is this. Early last year, they pretty much had all their big-time recruits already in the class early. Tyler Buckner, Lorenzo Stiles, Blake Fisher, Deion Colsey, Kane Barong, Gabriel Rubio. Most of those guys were committed really early. And so they weren't in a position to necessarily close on the big guys. Well, you look at this year's class; they've already got some top recruits in the class, right? Joey Tenona to me is a top 200 guy. Tyson Ford's a top 100 guy. You've got Josh Burnham's a top 100 guy. You've got some, Jaden Mickey's a top 250 guy. Jadarian Price is a top 250 guy. Ty Chan's a top 200 guy. So they've already got some relatively highly ranked recruits in the class now, which is why they rank, between 2nd and 4th, 2nd and 5th of all the analysts. But there's so many, to your point, Vince, big time players still on the board.
Yes.
That there's a much greater
because
chance
of everything that's going on.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Because what happens is you're number 2 and then you slowly start to fall down. It's not that your class has gotten worse. It's just other teams start adding players.
Right.
Well, Notre Dame is in a situation where they're really only about halfway done.
Sure.
And how the quality of what they do moving forward. So if they get junior 2 of, junior Tuihalamaka, Jalen Sneed, and Sebastian Cheeks, they're all 3 top 100 recruits. Just Sebastian Cheeks is like slightly outside, but to me, he's a top 100 recruit. If they get 2 of those guys, now all of a sudden, that's going to lock you into that spot for now. If they go out and can add another highly ranked receiver, if they can get one of the big 3 running backs, they're all top 100 recruits.
Yeah.
Right. If you can add a couple of those highly ranked top 150 linemen that we talked about in the Dream Class podcast I did yesterday. So that's going to be the key to them staying in that top 5 category. Whereas in the past, they would load up their best players are already committed.
Yeah.
They're going after so many more highly ranked guys than they have in the past that I feel a whole lot better about their ability to close because the margin is so much wider now. Whereas in the past, it's like, okay, there's 5 studs on the board and they all play different positions. And hopefully you can get 3 or 4 of them. Well, that's not going to happen. Now you got 4 or 5 studs at running back or, 3 studs at running back. You got to get one of them. Now you got 4 studs at linebacker. You got to get 2 of them.
Yeah.
You got 3 great players at corner. You just got to get one of them. And so I think they're in a much better position because they are so aggressive, especially on defense.
Yes.
To having a phenomenal class on defense. And then you've got some players in your class like Aiden Gabera, who is a 3-star now. But if he's a 3-star when it's all said and done, it's because people aren't paying attention or there's some funny business going on because he's already outplayed 3-star because if you don't know, Aiden Gabera is playing his junior season right now.
Right.
They're playing a spring season and he has been a freaking monster so far. Bigger, stronger, faster, and dominant. So he should see a big jump in there too. And that's also key is your top players have to stay top players.
Absolutely.
And those other guys have to come up. So that's going to be the key to it.
Offensive question. And I know you love offense. Here we go. I know I love offense. Talking offense, what will it take to throw the ball downfield? Did Book just not do it It seemed to be more of a plan, i.e. ND loved the 7 to 10 yard crossing routes. I'm leading off on this one.
Go for it.
There were multiple opportunities to throw the ball downfield. Was it a centralized part of the game plan? Maybe not. But were there guys running open downfield? Yes. Yes, there were. And a small example, okay? Avery Davis, down the field, big play against Clemson, right? They play Clemson the second time. He's wide open again. They don't hit him.
And the pocket wasn't as clean. And that was a big thing. No, I'm saying that was a big thing for Ian Book.
There you
he
go.
Would make that throw if there was a super clean pocket and a clear one-on-one.
Right.
If it,
So for me, it was more about the quarterback. Could they open it up more with the plan? Yes, absolutely. But I felt like the trigger just wasn't being pulled enough from the quarterback position. Go.
I'm going to somewhat disagree with you on that. I agree that was the outcome. Where I disagree, though, Vince, is that I don't think it was just because of the quarterback. I think that Brian Kelly has beaten in don't turn the ball over so hard that they've gone too far. There's an unwillingness to throw the ball. If you go back and look at the first game against Duke, Ian Book made a throw to Michael Mayer on a drag route that was like he didn't make another throw like that the rest of the year. And he fit it between he rushed the read because not rushed the read. He saw it was going to happen, so he rushed his footwork and got the ball out quickly and fit it in between three guys. I think you know the play I'm talking about. It was in the first half. Well, then he threw 2 picks after that. One was a pick. The other one got called back. But I think that was one of those things where it's like, okay, not doing that anymore. I took some chances and we turned it over. I can't do that anymore. Yeah, you want to make sure, hey, man, like don't make that bad read. Don't make that throw, but without beating it so much that he's afraid to make those throws. I also think schematically they hurt themselves too, Vince, is yes, those guys getting open. But I think the way that they teach reads, he wasn't looking for those deep shots as much. But I also think because they use so much 12 and 13 personnel. And I did an article about this at irishbreakdown.com. If you haven't read it, check it out because the numbers are staggering. They release their backs into routes so infrequently and their second and third tight ends into routes so infrequently that it then makes it easier to have more guys deep to take away some of those throws. And when those guys are coming open, they're coming open later because of the fact that teams can be a little deeper. That I think by then Ian Book had already moved on from that deep. He wasn't even looking at it anymore.
Yeah, right.
And so I think there are things schematically that they don't scheme enough for those big plays. That would be my thing. Is yes, guys are open, but I don't think they scheme enough to create those openings.
And let me piggyback off of that as well, because when you're talking about scheming for an opening, there's times where that's your read, right? You've got a one-on-one, you've got a matchup that you like, whatever it is, that's your read. Throw it and see what happens because you've got dudes that can go up and make plays. And I don't see that happening enough.
Yeah.
And I realize there
times. Sorry, go ahead, Vince.
I realize that's simplified football and that's not always going to work, but there are times where it does work. Yeah. Like, dude, you're faster than the guy standing here. You need to just go, and Ian, that's where you're throwing it.
And that's what prep work is for, right? Like, so we know in second and 2, if we line up like this, we feel pretty good about our chance of getting this one-on-one. Right. So in that situation, you call that play. That's what coaching is. I mean, I remember watching the NFL Network does, or the NFL Films does these great things, and they were going back and they were talking about the Broncos Falcons Super Bowl, right? Okay. And Eugene Robinson was doing something, and they do this thing where like Elway, Gary Kubiak, and Mike Shanahan are like scheming this one play because they know in this look when they run this route combination, Eugene Robinson is going to do this, and they're going to bang a post route behind it. There was no read. Elway was doing a bootleg and he was throwing a bomb to Rod Smith. That was it. And they knew what they were going to get because of pregame preparation. But then also, hey, look, he's being super aggressive right now in this game. He's trying to pick, because remember, he picked Elway off the year before in the Super Bowl because he played for the Packers. He picked Elway off in the end zone, and he was a very aggressive safety. And they're like, let's take advantage of this. And so they, this whole time with the defense on the field, they're scheming and planning and drawing up this play. How do you get it? And then 80-yard touchdown in ball game. And those are the things that have to happen too. I mean, you have to scheme your way into it. And if you have a feel like, hey, we think we know how we can get this safety manipulated this way. Clemson did that against Notre Dame in the ACC title game. They had Kyle Hamilton as the free safety, and they were getting Sean Crawford playing the slot. So Clemson came out in a series and they said, Trevor, he looked off Kyle Hamilton to the right hard.
Yeah.
And as soon as Kyle Hamilton turned his hips, he came right back to the post route to Amari Rodgers. There's no way he comes back to the backside post route that quickly if they didn't already say, hey, look, we are going to take this shot. And if we get Hamilton off the hash, you're coming right back to it. They knew they could get Notre Dame into that.
Yes.
And they were going to try to manipulate that. So, and if Hamilton stays back, then you've got a crossing route that you dump it off to. So you always have your outlet. And I don't think Notre Dame does enough stuff like that.
Right.
Where they're scheming their way into – because they did it more under Chip Long, and I hope that they do it more under Tommy Rees. I think this was a Brian Kelly thing. He wanted this offense to be ground and pound, ball control. We're going to win with defense. We're going to run the ball.
And not take any chances.
Perfectly fine beating Louisville 12-7. Whereas
he was. Absolutely.
Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney are going to be like, good Lord, if we play like this against somebody that has a pulse, we're going to be in trouble.
Right. You're right.
Because what did you do? That's exactly how you played on offense against Clemson in the ACC title game, and that's exactly how you played on offense against Alabama, and you lost because your defense is not going to hold those offenses to 7 points.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Okay, Dylan has a very long question, so it's a two-parter, so hold your water until we get to the second part, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Tom Loy wrote an article about Notre Dame still being in play for Danny Dennis Sutton. Is that worth getting excited about, or how steep of an uphill battle is that? Here's the follow-up. Is 3 defensive ends the number, or you think they'd take 4? Ford, Gobera, Wesolak, Tafiti, Sutton. I suppose Ford Sutton could have the size to eventually move inside. Go.
Okay, so no, I don't think that that's one worth getting excited about. I think that's Tom Loy from Irish Illustrated. I don't think Tom is blowing smoke up your you-know-what, because there is a level of interest there.
Sure.
But there so far, to me, that would be a one of the biggest upsets Notre Dame would ever pull off.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the kind of guy. Having said that, if they get a DJ Wesolak or a Teva Tafiti, who's from Hawaii, then they're done they're done with 3.
Yeah.
But talking to sources, they're still going to recruit studs. Cyrus Moss is one of those.
Room for studs, baby.
Danny Dennis Sutton is one of those.
Yep.
So if they had 3 and Cyrus Moss or Danny Dennis Sutton wanted to then come, they would go to 4. Yeah. They're not planning to go to 4. If they get those 3, and I think Wesolak is the number 1 pick right now. If you get Ford, Gobera, and Wesolak, they love that. That's a great trio. But they're also at the point now where it's like, look, if we can get a game changer, we're going to take a game changer. I think Danny Sutton is super raw, but he could be a 6'6", 240 freaky athlete. You don't say no to that. And the same thing with Cyrus Moss. You don't say no to that. And that's the position that Notre Dame is in.
All right. Let's see here. Do you project Wesolak to ND after he was offered by Alabama? I
mean, look, when Bama gets in the mix, that's always one that gives you pause. But I still feel really good about what Notre Dame is with that one.
Okay. Love that. Kind of a broader question from DJ. Will this year's linebacking core be good enough? I want to lead off on this one. I think there's talent here. There's talent at the linebacker position. I still think there's question marks as to how the linebackers are going to be used. So I'm not sure I have an answer. Excuse me. I'm not sure I have a full answer, because it just depends on how Marcus Freeman wants to use the linebacker group and who he's going to play with who. Who takes over that will position? Are they going to have, a traditional rover? I mean, all of those. There's so many questions about linebacker that I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. They've got talent. There's talent there. I think they can be good. And I think Marcus Freeman's going to put them in a position to be successful. But there's too many question marks to really cement a decision on whether they're going to be solid or not.
Yeah. It's simple as this. Can they be good enough? Yeah.
Yes.
I think they have the athleticism to be very good. Will they? I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm confident in it, because look, anytime you have volume of talented players, the odds of things working out for you are greater.
Yep.
Because it's not like, well, hopefully this guy pans out, but if he doesn't, we're screwed because his backup's a walk-on who shouldn't be playing at this school. Not all walk-ons are that way. I'm making a point.
Yeah.
So will they be good enough? I don't know, but I have greater confidence in the linebacking core than I did a month ago, just because I'm thinking through it. Shane Simons struggles.
Is that his middle name now? Is Shane Simons?
Shane Simons struggles last year, I think, are going to benefit him because he got so much opportunity.
Absolutely.
But if he doesn't step up, Marist is going to benefit from all the playing. They had some guys like that had never really played before, not real minutes, just special teams. So I think those things are going to benefit. I'm more confident that they're going to be good. And I also think Marcus Freeman, the new voice. I think sometimes no matter how great the previous coach was, sometimes new voice can just shake things up enough to get him over the hump. And I think Nick Lazinski staying is also going to be big for this football team too.
Yep, nice little bridge. Okay, this is the one I was looking for from before. What are you wanting to see? Not here at Spring Pool. We're not going to see anything. But I didn't mention O-line. I am very interested to hear how the dominoes are falling on the offensive line. I meant to say that the first time we answered this question, so I wanted to get that part in. Ben has a question, Brian, about the offense. Who cannot afford to have a poor spring on offense?
That's my guy right there, though, by the way. Ben Hurt, that's my guy.
I like that name,
yes,
by the way.
He's a good dude. One of the best guys I've ever met. Ben, I think it's a long list because there is so much depth. I mean, as Vince was answering the question about the linebackers, I'm putting this list together of this is just spring, right? Guys are going to play in the spring.
Yes.
Braden Lindsey cannot afford to have a bad spring because he'll get passed up. He can't afford to be hurt again. I have an article about this, my Last Chance U article, 5 offensive players that have to step up this spring or they're going to be at risk of losing their jobs. He's at the top of the list because he could be a game changer on offense or he could find himself getting passed up. I hope he has a great spring. Pick a veteran offensive lineman, and he is a guy that can't afford to have.
He's on that list, yeah, absolutely,
and that includes Josh Lugg. I mean, Josh Lugg, and for different. I don't think Josh Lugg is going to get beat out. It's more about if he doesn't have a big spring, that hurts the line. So his is a little different situation. Houston Griffith cannot afford to have a poor spring. Shane Simon and Drew White cannot afford to have poor springs. Jason Adamiola cannot afford to have a poor spring because those are all guys that, to me, have young players breathing down their necks. I don't think Jason Adamiola is going to have a poor spring. I think he's going to have a great spring. I'm just saying he can't afford to have one. I've already said how great I think that tandem could be in our we actually recorded this beforehand. It'll be out tomorrow where I talk about what I think Riley Mills and Jason Adamiola could be this year.
Yeah,
and it could be special. But he can't because look, you've got Riley Mills and Gabriel Rubio. Yeah. You can't afford to have a poor spring. So to me, at the top, those are the guys that I would say. And of course, if you're a veteran quarterback not named Jack Cohn, you can't afford to have a poor spring because you're going to find yourself getting passed up by Tyler Buckner real fast.
All right, let's see here. I like this Wisconsin question from Dylan. What would your thoughts be if Notre Dame takes all 3 guys from Wisconsin? Early win against the Badgers?
It would be a great win. I don't think I would love that just from look, they're all great players. That would be Joe Bruner, who's sort of a big right tackle guard, Billy Schrauth, who's kind of a guard tackle hybrid, and then Carson Hinsman, who I think is probably the best center, one of the best center prospects in the country, along with Joey Tanona, by the way, who Notre Dame already has. But Joey Tanona could play center guard or right tackle. The reason is that those 2 of those 3 guys for sure project to be interior players, and all 3 of them could eventually end up being interior players. And to me, that's way too guard heavy. That's way too interior heavy when you put them with Joey Tanona. Look, the reality is you can take 5 tackle types and move them inside. You can't always take guard bodies or guard guys who project better at guard and move them to tackle for the reasons we talked about at the beginning of the show. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily love that. But if they got 2 of the kids from Wisconsin and added a George Fitzpatrick, a Jake Taylor, a Zach Rice to that mix, oh yeah, I'd feel really good about that. I'd feel really good about that.
Sure. This is a fun question because we've talked about this a bunch, and Matty K is always bringing the good stuff. How could the offense implement all these weapons like Austin, Lindsey, Watts, Johnson, Colsey, Styles, etc., and still had the physical run game that has won about 10 games a year for us? Thoughts?
Watch Oklahoma. I'm being serious. I'm not being serious. Watch Oklahoma. Oklahoma has run for more yards than Notre Dame most of the last 5 years. This past year, they didn't. They had a young team. I think they lost like 4 starting offensive linemen. It was a weird year. Redshirt freshman quarterback. They averaged 179.7 yards per rush or per game. So that'd be a heck of a rushing percentage there per play. But they averaged 4.7 yards per rush. Notre Dame was at 5.0 and averaged over 200 yards. But in 2019, Oklahoma, with Jalen Hurts, a quarterback, averaged 240 rushing yards per game, 5.95 yards per rush. In 2018, with Kyler Murray, they averaged 247 rushing yards per game and 6.6 yards per rush. The year before that, in 2017, they averaged 217.8 yards per game and 5.6 yards per rush. In 2016, 236.8 yards per game, 5.4 yards per rush. In a couple of those years, they had Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks, and they were averaging over 200 some yards per game. Part of that was because with Kyler Murray in 2018, you had a quarterback that could run.
Sure.
You did not have that when you had Baker Mayfield there, and they still averaged over 200 yards a game. So that was the difference between like 217 and 240 was you had a quarterback that could run. So to me, it's about the tempo. It's about more plays. You run more plays. You run 5-10 more plays a game, and you stretch that over the course of a season. You're having over 100 more plays onto the end of your season. That means if you have a legitimate rotation system, that means those are more plays for those guys. Those are more opportunities. And look, throwing the football does not require you to be a passive team, and that's the greatest thing that the RPOs have brought, in my opinion, beyond just the ability to always be right.
Yeah.
It's that you can literally call a pass play where your linemen are firing off the ball. If you're a team like Texas Tech used to be, like Washington State is now, it can be very hard to be a physical running team and throw the ball 50 times a game because there's so much pass setting. And pass setting, and its very nature in those offenses, is a passive thing to do.
That's correct.
It is a
catch back, literally.
Right. And it's not – you know, way Notre Dame did on their stand, they were physical pass blockers, but there's still a pass setting. And then the next player, you're going to come out and you're just going to have to fire off. It can be challenging.
Sure.
In RPOs, you may throw the ball 40 times a game, but 15 of those throws were the offensive linemen were run blocking.
Right.
You know, so you can still be physical. You can still be aggressive. You can still get after it. North Carolina is another example. Look how explosive they were with their pass game. They were well over 300 yards a game passing the football. They had 2,000-yard running backs.
Right.
And they both averaged over 7 yards a carry. So I think to your point, Maddie, is I think that's why Notre Dame would be so good with an RPO offense. Because if you are getting the ball outside to Austin, Lindsey, Watts, Johnson, Colsey, Styles, Mayer, Barong, all those guys, and you're still physical with your 5 to 6 man run game inside, how do you defend that?
Yeah.
As good as Notre Dame is on the offensive line, if you're because what the RPOs do is it forces you to spread the field. If you're doing more, 3 receivers or moving your tight ends out of the box, it forces teams to spread the field, and now all of a sudden you have even more room to run. So Kyron Williams is still going to get his 1,200 yards, but he's going to do it on 25, 30 less carries. That's great. And that makes you a better offense. So that's how I hope I answered your question. But to me, that's how you do that.
Connor has a very, very broad question, and we will be covering this topic all through the summer. Mm-hmm. But he wants to know have you heard anything recently about how Notre Dame's 21 opponents are shaping up?
It's so early.
It's really early.
We don't know how. It's like I may say, hey, look. If you'd asked me a week ago if Notre Dame was playing Georgia, boy, I tell you what, that JT Daniels, George Pickens combination is going to be lethal. Well, then he tears his ACL the other day.
Yeah.
So it's just we have to get through spring, Connor. I think I just early on, I think it's going to be a good schedule, but not a brutal schedule. Wisconsin has a ton of questions. Their offense was abysmal last year.
Yeah.
USC lost a ton of players.
They all
North Carolina didn't lose a ton of players, but the few guys they lost were really good.
Yeah.
So it's just so early. You don't know who's going to step up. Look, every team in the country right now is asking the same questions about their team that we're asking about in Notre Dame. It's just the positions are going to be different.
Yep.
So it's early, but we will have a lot this summer where we'll be breaking down the opponents.
And there's a lot of mutual admiration society between Dylan Bennett and Dylan Hoffman. They love each other, and that's awesome. My son's name is Dylan, so I'm on board. I can't
be upset about that. I talked to someone the other day whose name is not only Brian, but Brian with a Y. He's like my new best friend. There's so few of us. We have to stick together.
You do have to stick together. Searcher, another broad question. What coach is out there that people think would do better at Notre Dame? It's a small list, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, look. Anyone that says, hey, get rid of Brian Kelly, you need to have –
you better have something in your back pocket.
Yeah. I think there's obviously Urban Meyer and, guys like that. But
he's busy.
Yeah. Steve Spurrier went to the NFL too. How long did that last? We'll see how it goes for Urban. It's a little different coaching in NFL than it is in college.
It is. But I'll be keeping my eye out for sure.
Yeah. So I'm hesitant to kind of get into my list because then it seems like I'm being critical of Brian Kelly, but I think Jeff Brom would be a great fit at Notre Dame. I think he'd do a great job at Notre Dame. Offensive genius and also a strong recruiter. I mean, there's guys like, Ryan Day, but he's not leaving Ohio State. I mean, to me, this is an interesting time because over the next couple of years, we're going to see guys emerge. If you'd have asked who the coach was that was going to replace Charlie Weiss in 2007, no one would have been talking about Brian Kelly.
Sure.
But then in 2008, 2009, he then kind of took that next step and became a beast. So there's some coaches I have on my radar. Jeff Brom's one, Matt Campbell's one.
Oh, you're getting into it.
Guys like Marcus. But I think another thing is I want to see what Marcus Freeman does as the defensive coordinator the next couple seasons. I really do.
Yeah.
So if Brian Kelly were to leave, and that's what it would be about him deciding it's time, because you just never know when that light goes. I mean, I don't think Bob Stoops went into his final season thinking this is my final season, but the competitor's like, hey, you know what? I just don't have the juices anymore, man. I don't have that same excitement to go out and do this and do that, and I know it's time to walk away. And if Brian Kelly hits that point and he walks away, there's going to be plenty of good options. But some of those guys like Jeff Brom need to have good years this year, because as good of a coach as I think he is, you can't go 4-8 and get hired in Notre Dame. Right. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And that's kind of where we're at with this.
Michael Johnson would like to know, I wonder if he's the sprinter. That would be cool. How can we get 4 to 5 5-star kids that are in the top 50?
Well, number one, Michael, I don't obsess about that too much, because I think those top 50 kids, a lot of times, those are just guys that happen to be more ready. They're more physically advanced and they're more ready. How do they get more guys like that? I think it comes down to things we've talked about before. Brian Kelly has to be more involved. He has to be more involved early. They have to get sooner. They have to get faster starts on kids. They can't wait till kids are juniors and seniors to really get on them. Well, guess what? Those two things have been happening the last couple months. Brian Kelly has been mentioned with recruits, talking to them more in the last month. And I said this on the radio show last night. I've heard Brian Kelly's name mentioned with recruits talking to him directly,
which is huge
in not just 2022, but 2023 kids.
Yeah.
We had a little notebook yesterday at irishbreakdown.com where Keon Keeley, who is a 2023 defensive end, talked about how he's already talked to Coach Kelly.
Yeah.
That's big time.
That hasn't happened in the past.
No.
Put that out there.
Maybe a kid here, a kid there, but we're hearing it constantly. That's a great sign. That's needed. He doesn't have to be Ryan Day where he's calling kids every day. And that's just who Ryan Day is. But Coach Kelly has to be a part of the process.
Agreed.
And that's big, in my opinion.
And just kids, it's all part of the conversation here. Right. Jeff wants to know if Notre Dame's in on any of the 5-star ranked players right now.
Honestly, I couldn't tell you, Jeff, because I don't look at really the rankings that much. I'll look at rankings when I'm entering them into a story, or when I do my prospect profiles, but I don't pay a lot of attention to them.
Fair.
To me, there's kids. I look for upside. I look for ceilings. Well, and there's plenty of kids with 5-star upside that Notre Dame is on. I think Zach Rice is in that category. I think Rivals has him as a top player. I think Xavier Nwankpa, I believe, is a guy that is in there, but I'd have to go back and really look through them to kind of see who are those guys that other outlets have ranked high. But I do know that they're after a lot of high-level kids. And to Michael's point, the original question from Michael Johnson, it's about getting guys that have the tools to be elite players, not guys that I don't think anyone thought Will Fuller was going to be who Will Fuller was, because he got 0.2 of a second faster in college. You don't project that. Right. But you can look at a Jeremiah Owusu and say, well, I think this kid's got a chance to be something. Notre Dame did that with Adi Ogundeji. That's why they went and got him to flip from Western Michigan. I remember talking to Notre Dame coaches when they got him. They're like, hey, I know we flipped him from Western Michigan, but just watch the film. I'm telling you. And you watch the film, you're like, okay, I kind of see it. He's got a long way to go, but I see the tools. And so you're seeing more of those kind of guys that Notre Dame is getting, that maybe they're not highly ranked, but they have that ceiling. And that's what Notre Dame has turned out. I mean, look, I wouldn't trade 3-star Adi Ogundeji for either of Alabama's 5-star starters, LeBron Ray or Justin Aboigbe. Go look at their stats. Go watch their film. Tell me if you would have traded them. Would you trade Dylan Moses for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah? I wouldn't.
Right.
And the guy that dominated Notre Dame in the playoff game on the defensive line was Christian Barmore. He was ranked like 170th. Right. So it's about finding that ceiling, recruiting guys that have that high ceiling, more so than the guys that are top 50 players right now.
All right. Let's see here. David wants to give you some props here. When you were on the Mark Rogers earlier this week, I felt that I felt the hostility. I was ready to crack some skulls. You held your composure better than me. Our Miami fans just lost.
I think Miami fans are still living in the 80s and 90s. But honestly, how I hold my composure is I don't read the comments. I don't. I used to read Twitter responses to me all the time, and I just lived fired up. I'm just like,
you
I
did.
Don't care.
You did.
I mean, Vince, okay, whatever. I don't care. And so when I'm on Mark's show, if he pulls a comment to the front, I'll answer it. But I also I love that passion because if fans weren't passionate about their programs, I think some people cross the line when they want to get in, throw insults. And there's too many adults that don't know how to talk like adults. And that doesn't mean not being fired or passionate, or arguing or debating or telling me I don't know what I'm talking about. But then you want to start saying, calling people names and stuff like that. That's childish, and I don't have time for that.
Right.
But I love that passion because, look, if y'all weren't passionate about Notre Dame, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. You wouldn't be listening to this live show. I love the passion because I'm passionate about college football. I was passionate about Notre Dame. I got in trouble once my second year of coaching. It was the day where in 2002 when they beat Florida State. They were playing at Florida State and they were supposed to get smoked. And I had this flip phone, and it was when you could first start getting alerts and stuff on your phone, or you could go to the internet. And we were playing Gettysburg College, and we were beating the crap out of Gettysburg. It was 41-0. So I'm over there kind of checking my flip phone to see the score of the Notre Dame Florida State game. And some parent saw me do it and narked on me, told the head coach.
They didn't know what you were doing, though.
Yeah, checking the I don't care. Mind your business. I'm checking Notre Dame scores. But in 2005, we had a game, I believe it was against Averett College, and it was the day of the Notre Dame USC game in 2005. So I had the video guy go into the coach's office during halftime and set up we had a big projector, and we could connect our VCRs to the internet. And so after the game, I went and shook the players' hands. I said hi to a couple parents, and then I sprinted to the locker room, and I stepped into the locker room at the minute where Tommy Zibikowski is receiving that punt, and he runs it back for a touchdown. And I'm going crazy. And everybody's like, oh, you're really fired up about the Aver win. Don't care. That's in the past. We won the game. They suck. It's about Notre Dame USC. So I have passion for Notre Dame. And I love the fact that fans do. And if they didn't, then I'd have to find a real job where I'd have to go work at Costco or something, or do something where I'd have to put a tie on. And I'm working wearing a ball cap and an old football coaching shirt. And it's because of y'all have passion.
Yeah.
So that stuff doesn't bother me. The people that cross the line and call names, that says more about them than it does me. And it used to bother me a lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't anymore. I got more important things to worry about in my life.
All right, Big Jim wants to talk about Jack Cohn. He says, I think Cohn is going to surprise some people. Can throw, can run, can think. I agree. And I said this in our podcast that's going to come out tomorrow. So we did a little segment on Jack Cohn, so I'm not going to dive too deeply into this. I was against them bringing him in and anointing him the starter. I was not happy about it when it happened. I understood them bringing in a veteran presence. I got that because of what the room looked like with Phil Jakovic transferring. You lost the veteran presence in there, and you don't know what you're going to get from Clark. So I was fine with that, but the anointing of the starter, I wasn't okay with. But the more I watched the film, the more you and I talked, I agree. I think if things go the way I hope that they go, and he has all the weapons at his disposal, I think Jack Cohn could be really, really good. And he's only going to be here for a year, but I think that year could be special for Jack Cohn. And we'll see what happens. But I'm okay with Jack Cohn. I am in the fan club.
I agree. I thought Jim's point was spot on, and you followed up with great stuff. I have nothing else to add. That was great.
All right, let me see here.
Here's a good one from Searcher Green 9. Is there a deadline for the transfer portal? What is the latest Notre Dame can go after to the portal for a position of need? Honestly, the deadline officially is the first day of class of the fall.
I was going to say, they've brought people in the summer before.
Yeah, and so the only question is the later you go, the less time you have to get an appeal for an immediate, because there still is not the rule for immediate transfer has not been passed yet NCAA wide.
Yeah.
Now, some conferences are proposing things to allow that. I think the ACC just recently did that proposal. But right now, Oklahoma's holding up a quarterback who wants to transfer to TCU because they say, look, the rule is right now you got to sit out a year. We're not going to grant you immediate eligibility to go play in a team in our league that we have to play. It just makes sense. So the later you wait to decide that, unless you're okay sitting out, which I think is still a great rule. And if we could have a conversation about that, but the later you wait, the more likely it is you don't get that passed right away.
And this is along a similar wavelength. I could see Notre Dame maybe going the transfer route and more peeps leaving after spring, possibly.
Yeah.
Think that's possible once semester is over. There's always a chance of people hitting the transfer portal after spring because
they didn't get Nick McLeod till like May, right?
Right, because the two deep becomes a little bit more cemented after spring, and the writing's on the wall for some guys. And we've talked about some veterans that if they don't step up in the spring, they're going to get passed up. Those are the guys that would be the ticket to get out.
And some guys know I better do well this semester in the classroom because right now there's my options are more limited because I jerked around as a freshman. So I got to have a good semester to get my grades up enough to where I can transfer.
Now, there's definitely that. Okay.
Here's one from DBZ. Would you be surprised if Henderson and Hart flat out won the cornerback spots? I'd be a little surprised if Henderson did, just because he hasn't played as much and he's younger and he's more of a field guy, I think, right now. But yeah, look, he's an elite athlete. There's no doubt about it. He's just still a raw corner. So I'd be a little surprised by that. But, David brings that up too. But look, if Ramon, would I be would I be surprised if they both won cornerback spots outright? Yeah, I would. Would I be concerned about Notre Dame? No, because again, those guys are very high ceiling players. The only thing that would concern me if they won spots outright is if it was because a couple guys got injured.
Sure.
Then you'd be a little concerned. But yeah, there's about 6 corners that if they win the job outright, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah,
I'm feeling like they're going to be fine.
I'll let
me say this. That's why I'm less concerned about corner than I am safety. Because I don't feel that way about the 3rd, 4th, 5th safeties. I feel there's a big talent gap between number 1 and 2 and everybody else. At corner, I say, Ramon Henderson may be raw and may need another year to develop, but the talent's there. So if the light goes on, okay, yeah, sure. I believe I gave him a 4.5-star upside grade, even though he had like a 3 or 3.5-star grade, because very raw, low floor, but a very high ceiling. And back to Michael Johnson's question, that's the kind of player that I think Notre Dame can and has thrived with in the past.
All right, Dylan, best case scenario, over under top 100 recruits in the class of 22 for Notre Dame.
So are we talking composite? I'd say probably I'd set the over under for being realistic for a legit class. I'd set it at 6, and that'd be kind of where I'd say, okay, now you can kind of pick the over under. They're usually like around 4, 3 to 4. So if we're talking about them having one of their better classes, I think you set the over under at 6, and I'd feel good about it being there and potentially going over by 1 or 2. I mean, they've already got a couple guys on that cusp now.
Right.
They'll definitely have that many guys, in my opinion, of who's ranked 100 by somebody. Somebody will rank them in the top
consensus.
100. Yeah, right. But not I'm looking at the composite list, and that's a little bit different.
All right. Donnie wants to know if you're hearing anything specifically about the wide receivers and learning the playbook.
We talked a little bit about this. I've heard some good things about Jordan Johnson. He's having a very good offseason. His weight was way up, so it looks like he's been putting in the work in the weight room. Lorenzo Styles has made a very strong impression so far. It's hard to say about the playbook because it's just until you get out there with the team and you're doing things in those live settings, you don't really know how guys are going on that one. So I'm feeling good about it. I'm feeling good about where they are with the receiver right now. I think that but anything I'm hearing though, I'm reluctant to put much stock in it because we've heard this stuff before.
We don't get to.
Yeah. Here, real quick, Jeff Salmon. I see Vince has an IB hat now. What are those going to be made to the public? Vince has always had one. I gave him one this.
I can only wear them at home though. That's the thing. I can only wear them
at school.
Yeah.
I'm working on that. So
Good.
I actually had a conversation with somebody 2 days ago that sells merchandise and got some advice from him. I hired a company recently to start doing some research into what the best options would be for us. So I'm looking into hats, shirts, hoodies, and potentially some gear like mugs and things like that, masks, things like that. So definitely looking into that because I'm surprised how many people have asked about that. And
it's a sweet hat, Brian.
It's not only that, but it's just like, the fact that we do this and people watch and listen, and it means the world to me. It really does. I don't take it for granted. If I don't say thank you enough, I'm sorry, but I mean it. It's fun. It makes this sense of community that we're building. Yeah. It makes us so much more fun.
I'm going to throw this out there. Is the interview with Mark Rogers available online? They all want to hear what the heck happened with you and the Miami guy.
So if you go to Mark, I don't know if the chats are there, but yeah, if you go to Mark Rogers, he's the voice of college football is what part it is. But yeah, Mark Rogers on YouTube, and it was one that I did I've been on twice with him now, but it was the one that he and I did together. Apparently there were some Miami people going crazy in the chat, but I wasn't paying attention.
All right. Michael Collins has an interesting question. Rob Kelly said content creation communication comes from fighting Irish media, which dedicates people to support football, but is not a part of the football program. Can you please comment on the pros and cons of Notre Dame media versus top programs? It's a pain in the butt.
That's semantics. No, look, here's the deal. Notre Dame is trying to control the narrative.
Correct.
They're trying to control everything that comes out of the program. And in some ways, I think it's great. I think it's smart to have that media because, look, in a world of social media, that's how you reach young people is cool graphics and cool video and tell their own. And I have no problem with that. My issue, however, and I'm not going to get into this too much, is they're doing that while then making rules and restrictions for us that limit our ability to then provide a consenting voice or dissenting voice. And that's an issue that I have. We see that too much in politics. We see that too much. We're now seeing that in sports media where it's like people feel like if I'm critical of the team, then I worry about getting cut off. And that it shouldn't be that way unless you're crossing the line and making it personal. And if I'm out there every day, Brian Kelly sucks, he needs to be fired. Yeah, okay, take away my credentials because now I'm not a real analyst. I'm just a hack. But if you're providing real, hey, look, here's why I don't think Brian Kelly's getting it done. Here's why I think he's falling short of a title. Here's why he's not doing a good enough job. And I'm presenting you evidence in the debates. And that should be part of my job. But there are people let's just say I used to talk to a lot of more Notre Dame coaches than I do now. And that's fine. I get it. But that's my issue is they're trying to if they want to put out their own narrative and their own spin, that's fine. But then don't make rules that make it harder for everybody else. And you can say, look, right now they're using COVID as the reason for it. I'll buy it. I don't want to get into that conversation, but I'm very curious to see how it's going to be in the fall when you really can't use that.
They love the Zoom press conferences, man, because they can control every question that was asked.
Right. And that, press conferences where you're not getting asked real questions are not real press conferences. They're just, they're campaign stops essentially. That's all it is to it.
Whistle stops. All right. Just so you know, Brian, I got about 2 minutes and then I got 5 kids getting off the bus.
Yeah, it gets a little loud at the Dare household.
It definitely does. I know where you're going with this one. He goes, I don't know if this has been asked and answered, but how much has Aiden Gobera gone up in your rankings?
Yeah, Brandon, you brought this up on a YouTube comment the other day, and I agree with you completely. For me, he's already jumped up to a top 200 player. I had him so I have a 2-tier ranking. It's where you are now and then what your upside grade is. He's always had a 4.5-star upside grade, which means that of a top 50 player, a 3-year starter who can be an All-American caliber player. He was the 3.5-star was because I didn't see his body. We didn't see junior film. Well, now we're seeing junior film, and he's added about 30 pounds, and he's more explosive. Right. He's stronger. He's dominant. So to me, he's immediately jumped up into top 200 territory, and that's only a few games into his junior year. If he keeps this up the whole year, he's going to be top 150, top 100. He's been that good for me. I can't speak to what other analysts are going to view him and rank him. I don't know. I just know that when I have conversations on my site, here's what he ranks, and I have independent rankings of anyone else. When I have conversations with the people at SI All-American, he will be a guy that I'll be pushing for if he continues this to be a guy that we talk about being an SI 99 all-around player. Now, will they listen to me or not? I don't know. I don't have final say-so on that.
Yeah, right.
But I will certainly make the case because his junior film against good competition is very, very good.
All right. Searcher wants to know, is ND pushing hard for Isaac Ham or Ernest Cooper IV? I haven't heard you mention them.
Yeah, Isaac Ham to me was no longer an option when they got Tyson Ford. I just don't know if they're going to take 2 guys like that. I love his film, and I think Minnesota Wisconsin's a strong look for him. Ernest Cooper, I've heard people, I think Tom Loy has written some stuff on him. I just don't see that one happening. I also don't think he's as good as his ranking projects. I think there's 4 or 5 ends that I like better than him. So that's part of the reason I haven't talked about him a whole lot is I don't know if that's a guy that I'm pushing for. And then talking to my sources, he's not a guy that I've heard when I talk about, hey, who are your top guys? Who are the guys you feel you got to get? His name isn't really one that comes up real quick. So Vince, you got to roll. I'll go ahead and just finish this up. This has gone real long, but we'll roll through these last few.
I appreciate it. I love all the comments and all the participation. I'm telling you, this is my favorite day of doing podcasts. I love doing the lives, and it's awesome.
Vince actually told me was it Tuesday? You told me that usually Wednesday's your free day, and then Friday you're in school.
Yeah, and
he told me he had Friday. It switched things around because of things going on at his school, so Friday was going to be his free day, and he was so excited.
I'm like, yes, I get to be there longer. Yeah.
So, all right, thanks,
so I will see everybody later. Got to go wrangle the
little
ones.
All right. KMA Preston ask, I imagine Indy can only take one of the tight ends, Holden Stace and Eli Raridan. So who does Indy prefer and who do you like more? I wouldn't be so sure of that. I could see a scenario in which Notre Dame is going to take both of those guys. I think that they would try to make it work when it comes to scholarships at other positions. I think they like both of them because when you look at, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but when you look at Jack Nickel and Holden Stace and Eli Raridan, they are all three completely different players from each other. There's no two that are alike. So I think they could make that work. And when your third tight end last year played 345 snaps, you can grade or justify a third tight end if you're going to continue to do that. But I could see a scenario in which they take both of those guys. Which one do I prefer? I think Holden Stace is the better player now. I actually like Eli Raridan's upside as much as Holden Stace so far. Now, again, we got to see them both play their senior years, and that could change, but that's where I'm at with them. They're just different players, KMA. I mean, that's the thing for me is Stace is sort of a Michael Mayer type of skill set where, style of play, whereas Raridan is more of a Tyler Eifert kind of guy as far as style of play. Alize Mack, guy that you're not going to play attached as much. So it just depends on what you're looking for. So for me, it's just, I think they could take both. Which guy I like more? It depends on which day you ask. I mean, they're very close. That's the thing. They're very close. Michael Scheller, what's up, Michael? Hey, Brian, without giving any names, are you aware of any silent commits? Yes, I am. A couple, actually. Paul Olmstead, Marcus Freeman is setting the bar for recruiting. What does offense have to do to follow suit? Honestly, Paul, it's about creating a greater sense of accountability. When your defensive coordinator is grinding and he's a proven guy, and your defensive line coach is the recruiting coordinator and he's a proven guy, it sets the bar. And on defense, they just have happened to hire guys that are really good recruiters and love recruiting. Mike Mickens likes to recruit. He's really good at it. Chris O'Leary, part of the reason he was hired is because he's a good recruiter. Marcus Freeman loves to recruit, or at least he acts like he loves to recruit. Mike Elson's been a grinder as a recruiter in recent years. I think the problem on offense is you don't have enough guys that like to recruit. I don't think Dell Alexander likes to recruit. At least he acts like he doesn't like to recruit. John McNulty's been an NFL coach more than a college coach. So there's a learning curve there when it comes to grinding. And he was an offensive coordinator the last time he was in college. And that's a different type of deal at a place like Rutgers. And it's different than Notre Dame. And then, Lance Taylor's a good recruiter, but I don't think he's a grinder. And then you've got a 28-year-old offensive coordinator who is grinding, but can he hold the same level of accountability as you're going to see on defense because of the existence of Freeman and Elson? I don't think that's the case. And that's where Coach Kelly has to really be more involved to say, hey, are you guys putting in the work? Here's our list of 4 guys. If we want to be a national title team, we got to get 2 of those guys. Go get it done. And I'm going to be checking on you every day and every other day to make sure you're putting in the work. That's the kind of accountability that Coach Kelly needs to create. And if he can create that level of accountability, it doesn't need to be there on defense because the coaches there are creating that. It's sort of like anything you can do, I can do better. I love the competitiveness there, but also the teamwork there. Again, I mentioned the Keon Keeley player that we mentioned the other day. Jayan Lee, a 3-star, or a 2023 cornerback from Georgia. AJ Harris. They're not just saying, hey, I talked to Coach Mickens. It's, hey, I talked to Coach Mickens and Coach Freeman and Coach O'Leary, and I've talked to Coach Kelly. There's this great teamwork being done. When I talk to sources that are not connected to Notre Dame, and they're saying, the offensive staff just doesn't – they're not as organized as the defensive staff. They're not as engaged. It's like, I talk to Coach Reese all the time, but I don't hear from Coach Alexander very often. That can't happen. And until Brian Kelly steps in and starts holding some accountability there, that's not going to change. But if he steps up and does that, and I'm loving the things I'm hearing about what Coach Kelly is doing, then I'm going to feel really good about things. Jeff Salmon, any players looking to transfer out? Not right now. I think there's some guys that, if depending on how spring goes, could be potentially leave. But right now, I think everybody that is bought in and looking to push, and then depending on how spring goes, guys will sort of reevaluate where they stand. But I think everybody right now is locked in. Black Rush, I can't stop watching you guys. Salute. Thank you, my man. I appreciate it very much. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate you commenting on the YouTube channel. Means a lot. Okay. Michael Johnson, would Walter Nolan fit this defense? Walter Nolan, Michael, can fit any defense that you have. If your defense can't fit Walter Nolan, if you don't know him, he is a He is a defensive lineman. He is, in my opinion, the best defensive player in the country. He is a star. If your defense doesn't fit Walter Nolan, then you need to find a new defense. He is that good. How's it going with Dylan Tatum? Notre Dame made Dylan Tatum's top 4, but he's never been a guy that Notre Dame has been pushing for. I think they've been recruiting him as sort of a, here's our tier 1 guys. If we miss out on them, we'll move on to Dylan Tatum, but he's never been a tier 1 guy. And also, he is going to stay in the state of Michigan. Michigan and Michigan State are the top 2 schools for him. So that's not really a guy that I look for. Brandon, my man, thoughts on Emil Wagner? Does he compare to Jake Taylor? Consider him better, worse? Is he a take over Taylor or Fitzpatrick? I don't know if he's a take over them. I think he's a take along with them. It's probably one of those first come, first serve, or first couple come, first serve. I think when Ohio State got in the mix for him, it changed the game. I like Emil Wagner. I think he's very athletic. I think he's a tough kid. My concern for him, he's undersized, but so is Fitzpatrick and so is Taylor. But when I see those guys, I see bigger bottoms. I see bigger legs. I see bigger cores. Emil Wagner looks more built like a defensive end than he does an offensive lineman. And I'm really concerned about his ability to stay that explosive and athletic when he puts weight on, where I'm not as concerned about those guys that have the bigger bodies, the bigger lower frames. So I have some concerns about him, but man, he's a heck of a high school offensive lineman. If they can get him on campus, or if Coach Bayless has already met him and he believes that he can get up to 290 plus and still be explosive, then he jumps up my list. It's just, I haven't seen him in person, so it's hard to really see, but what I see on film and in pictures, I really worry about his ability to fill out and maintain that level of explosiveness. Michael Collins, given Doors struggles at the end of the season, 1, how open is the competition between him, Brian, and Leonard? And 2, more likely that there's a starter change as the season goes on, quarterback or kicker? I'm hoping neither. I think it would be injury based. I think with Jonathan Doer, look, the other 2 kickers on the roster aren't as talented as him. So the key is just get him right. Just get him right. And I don't think with kickers, kickers aren't like most position players. And you threaten them to take their jobs away. They don't react the same way. I think Jay Bramlett probably be different because Jay Bramlett's a football player. He's not just a punter. He was a high school quarterback that led his team to the state playoffs. He's a football player. Jonathan Doer is just a kicker. And so I would not necessarily want a competition there. It's just, look, figure out whatever you got to do. Brian Polling, you don't have anything else to worry about. You're not the recruiting coordinator anymore. You're just a special teams coach. Whatever you do, figure out a way to get Jonathan Doer going, because he needs to be the guy. And if he doesn't step it up, then I could see a scenario in which Harrison Leonard takes over as the PAT short field goal guy, and until Josh Bryan's able to take over that job. But hopefully Jonathan Doer steps it up. Michael also asked, any chance Notre Dame could move a home game like Toledo to the week before FSU so they don't open on the road with a new QB and a reconstituted O-line? Will they add a home opener next year before opening at Ohio State? I actually am okay with it the way that it is. I think anytime you have an opener against a tough team, I don't think playing Toledo is going to necessarily change that. I think the good thing about this, Michael, is that's what your whole final 2.5 weeks of fall camp is geared towards. It's that road game. And I think that this isn't a typical Florida State team either. There's no chance that they can move the game because the NCAA determines when you can start the season. You can't just say, hey, we're going to play a game on August 20th because we were trying to move it. They couldn't move anything before that. I'm pretty sure of that. But I also don't think you necessarily would need to. I like the idea of playing in that situation. I mean, we've seen it before. 2015, they started against Texas. It was at home, but they started against Texas. And they had to replace, some good players, some veteran linemen from the season before, and they were fine. Some veteran players from the year before, and they were fine. I'm okay with that. Vincent Roberto, with Marcus Freeman has already done with recruiting. If he produces a top 15 defense, how do you keep him out? Keep him out of what? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Vincent. Could you follow up with me on that and kind of let me know what you mean? Because I'm not sure what you're asking there. KMA Preston, is Notre Dame looking to add any more transfers? Yeah, their eyes are open for it. I don't think they're necessarily scouring the transfer portal for anyone because they feel a desperate need somewhere. I think they've got their eyes open. I think this close to spring, it's more about let's just see what we have, especially with some new coaches on defense. Let's see what we have. You'd think, safety is going to be a one for sure, but let's say some guys step up this spring, then maybe you don't need it. So I think depending on how spring goes, I I think they could have their eyes open for some guys, kind of like we saw last year with Nick McLeod, who got added late. Last chance you forecast for Kendall Abdul-Rahman, Litchfield Ashevon, J.D. Bertrand, Osita Ekwonu, Nana Osafa-Mensah, Pryor, and Spears. Well, Spears is he is, but I mean, he's kind of behind Abdul-Rahman. To me, he's a redshirt sophomore and technically a redshirt freshman with the extra year. I'm not worried about him. Ashevon's a redshirt sophomore. Bertrand, Ekwonu, those guys are Osafa-Mensah. They're all redshirt sophomores. To me, I don't think you're in a last chance situation. Now, I do think they're in a situation where if they don't play well this spring, they could find themselves passed up, but they could then go out and have a great offseason and be back in the mix that next year. But you're getting to the point where, if not this spring, next spring for sure with those guys. My last chance you discussions are more about guys that are sort of in their last leg or maybe have a fifth year, but if you don't play well this year, they're not going to bring you back for a fifth year kind of thing. Any guesses on Indy's first 2023 commit could be? I don't necessarily feel comfortable doing that because it's so early, but there's some names have been mentioned. I think those two guys could be in that conversation. Cardinal Tate is another one. I could see Notre Dame, making a push on and there's some local guys that they're going to get on. I think we're probably still a month or two away at least from getting a 2023 guy. None of those guys have been on campus, but I think once that ball starts rolling, you're going to see them start filling up, 5 to 6 to 7 guys really quickly between now and the end of the season for sure. Let's see here. All right. Let's see here. Block. Mike Scheller, Coach Kelly's obviously getting more involved with recruiting, so he should demand the coaches that aren't engaged. I agree with you. So Saban James, I know there was a Cone breakdown when he committed, but can we have another to see more of what y'all have been talking about? So, I mean, I'm not going to do another full evaluation because we still have that one and we have no data points to prove differently from a big picture standpoint. So, we did an article at irishbreakdown.com and on the YouTube channel where we broke down his game. I showed some film. We've had some analysis stuff. What I am doing right now, however, and I've been working on it, I have the data collected. Now I just have to formulate it into an article and try to find some clips that I can't always use clips. Some clips are copyright protected or just bad shots, but I'm doing a breakdown where I believe Jack Cone is going to improve the deep ball ability. I like how he throws the deep ball. He didn't throw it a ton at Wisconsin, but I like how he throws it. And so that is one thing I'm working on now, Saban James. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be more, narrow in one specific part of the game. We've already talked big picture, what I like about him. So I would check those things out, but I'm going to kind of get into a couple smaller detail things that are gonna look at it. KMA Preston, how is Notre Dame looking with all the Wisconsin offensive linemen they're targeting? I mean, I think they could get all three of them. I don't think they're going to get all three of them. What I'm saying is each guy, I think Notre Dame is in his top 3. I think they're in great position with Billy Schrauth. If I could rank them most likely to least likely, I would go Billy Schrauth number 1. I think Notre Dame has been his leader for a long time. I think Notre Dame is in a great position with Carson Hinsman. Not saying that they're his leader. I think Wisconsin's there too, but I think they're in a good position there. And I think they're in good position with Joe Bruner. I think all three of those guys have Notre Dame at the very least in their top 2 or 3. So I wouldn't be shocked if they got any of those 3 guys. I don't think they're going to get all 3.